Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, February 4th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 210 days. The game against Michigan in 296 days. National Signing Day came and went very quietly for the Buckeyes. Linebacker Rayshawn Davis signed with USC. Defensive lineman JT Tuimoloau is waiting to potentially make visits this spring before he officially puts pen to paper and signs with someone. But while there was not a lot of recruiting news yesterday, there was a lot to talk about with OSU head coach Ryan Day during his press conference. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman joins me this morning. Tony, the big news was that sounds like the Buckeyes have filled that last assistant coaching spot.
Yeah, and that was finally announced by Ryan Day that they will be moving Parker Fleming from special teams quality control to special teams coordinator, assigning the entire secondary to Matt Barnes, who is was the safeties coach / special teams coordinator, and then moving Kerry Combs to taking him away from one position and just, you are now the defensive coordinator with freedom to roam. And so that's what they've done. Ryan Day said it was pretty much his initial thought that this is what they would do. Then he spent some time thinking about it and maybe seeing what else was out there. But when we talked to him last time, and he said, this was one of the first things he mentioned, it kind of caught your eye, well, he's not going to say that if he's not going to take it seriously. And so, yes, he's always been very positive about Matt Barnes, and now this will give Barnes more opportunity in the secondary. I still wonder what Kerry Combs is going to do without a position. And now they did say, well, sometimes he'll grab some linebackers, sometimes he'll grab some corners, maybe the nickel, because I do remember when Greg Mattison got here and he was pretty bored right away because he had no position to coach, and so that's why he grabbed the Sams and the Bullets. At least I think they already know that Kerry Combs isn't a guy that can just do nothing, and not do nothing, but have nothing or not be responsible for something. So it will be interesting to see how he does move around, because this is a guy who is constantly moving during practice. It will be interesting to see him then move from position to position or wherever he's going to go. It's going to be, I think it's going to be an adjustment for him as much as the Ohio State defense.
Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned Mattison, and he was the co-defensive coordinator last year. And Day was asked, so who's going to be the co-defensive coordinator this year? And the answer was no one. There is no co-defensive coordinator. This is Kerry Combs' show. So that is quite a vote of confidence from Ryan Day for Kerry Combs in terms of yes, he really thinks Kerry Combs is the guy to run the defense, and that by being focused on being a coordinator, he'll be able to straighten out a lot of the issues they had last year. I mean, I guess that's kind of the thinking there.
Absolutely. And it is a very big vote of confidence in Kerry Combs, because leading up to this, we were wondering, do you bring somebody who is more familiar with the style of defense? And what kind of power or sway would they have? And the answer is, this is Kerry Combs' defense. And it'll be what they do will be dependent on the personnel that they have. But I know the lasting memory from this 2020 team and this 2020 defense specifically is the Alabama game. And so when you see that and you're wondering, well, now you're giving Combs more control. Is that really what you want to be doing? But for me, there's just, as we've said with Jim Harbaugh, I can't place too much judgment on any particular coach during a pandemic. And that's where I keep coming down on this. And we'll certainly find out more about Combs and Barnes in 2021 with a full offseason, full spring, full fall camp, all of that, full summer. And we'll know more about the defense. But it's certainly a statement that Day is confident and comfortable with Kerry Combs, because if he wasn't, he wouldn't be here. And if he wasn't, he wouldn't have gotten this. I wouldn't call it a promotion, but there is, he's the only guy. He's the only coordinator. And so he's going to have a lot of say, but also going to be spread out more. And this allows, as Day said, he wanted more focus on the secondary. So this allows Barnes to be just removed from those special teams, although all coaches are still somewhat involved with special teams, but this gives Barnes more of a focus on the secondary, and then Combs can still go there as well. But we wondered what kind of setback or ego test this would be for Kerry Combs if they brought somebody else in. But Day's he's riding or dying with Kerry Combs on this one.
Yeah, this is going to be a very sink or swim year for Kerry Combs. It seems like, there's if it is a more normal season, and that's something that Ryan Day talked about a bunch of times, that, hey, they didn't have a normal spring last year, they didn't have a normal summer last year. It's going to be a better system and a better season, probably just because of that, because they'll have potentially a more normal spring and summer. That alone should help. If it isn't substantially better, then you start asking some tougher questions this time next year. Yesterday was also National Signing Day, which used to be a day that forced websites to bolster their servers and batten down the hatches, and was a flood of traffic. And now with early signing day, it was kind of like, oh, that was almost a non-event. And for Ohio State, it basically was a non-event. No, they did not add anyone to their 2021 class on National Signing Day. It does, however, sound, based on what Ryan Day can't say JT Tuimoloau's name under NCAA rules, but when he was asked about it in a very creative way that did not ask him to say the name, he did make it sound like they still have a spot saved for that 5-star defensive lineman from the state of Washington.
Yeah, they talked a lot about numbers, but said there would be room if need be for certain guys. It was interesting when Ohio State sent out a tweet at like 7 a.m. saying, "That's all, folks," regarding their signing class, because as you stated, that's on signing day. They're sending out all, this guy is now in, this guy is now in, and of course everybody signed with the early signing day period. And so while some Buckeye fans were waiting on the Rajon Davis news, Ohio State was like, no need to wait, we're done. And you'll be surprised later when Rajon Davis basically signs with USC. And so, there's certain guys you hold out room for, you keep room for, and JT Tuimoloau is one of those guys. And they will wait as long as possible. And we'll see if he takes visits this spring, which is, I guess, the plan. And Ohio State will be one of those visits, and they'll put everything they have in that basket when they try to get him to Ohio State. Because if you're going to hold out room for somebody, that's usually a pretty good indicator of the talent level, of the need for that kind of person, and the desire for that person. Also, like there's a commensurate desire for him to be there, and he wants to be there, and we'll see if that all works out. But we'll definitely wait as long as it takes to, probably the day before camp, even, Tom.
Yeah, I don't think they'd give it away his spot. That's one of the perks of being, the guy who is ranked number 1 overall in the nation by some people. One of the perks is people will generally hold the spot open for you. You don't, you're not getting rushed. You're not forced to sign a national letter of intent or risk having your spot given away. So that's the only thing. That's the only thing that's good about being the number 1 overall player in the class. But but that does work. One thing that you mentioned potentially taking visits for Tuimoloau, the NCAA has talked about. There's sort of been the idea floated that it might open up from a dead period to a quiet period on April 16th, which is a Friday, which ties in very neatly with Ohio State's new proposed schedule for spring ball. This is not all finalized yet, but what did Ryan Day have to say when he was asked about laying out sort of what spring ball might look like for the Buckeyes this year?
And he was quick to point out that this is a soft schedule at this point, but they're eyeing April 17th as the spring game, with the start of spring being around the middle of March. Normally, in a non-pandemic year, the spring ball would start around the 1st of March, like that first Monday or Tuesday of March. Then you have practice for a week, which is, I believe, like 2 or 3 practices. Then you go on spring break for about a week or 10 days, and then you get back to practice, and then the spring game ends up being around April 17th anyway. But this year with no spring break, I guess you push spring camp back a couple of weeks, and then you just go straight through that, 1 month of camp, and then you end on the 17th. And this also, I think, would provide more time for winter workouts as well, and you get more guys up to speed. And they're still rolling in those freshmen through their COVID protocols, and any of the quarantines that are still going on. And because they didn't get into too many specifics, but said not everybody has been taking part yet because they're not able to. But this would give them an opportunity, maybe with a longer winter workout, to then get ready for spring. So yeah, a month of spring football from about the middle of March through the middle of April, which would then allow an official visit or unofficial visit for JT Tuimoloau to the spring game, because it certainly seems like that would be the way that they would go without Day saying anything about it, but also did say that with some visits this late spring and summer, maybe he would be one of the guys there, just from inferring the things that he said. Because in the past I've said I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea to bring in somebody like him for a spring game visit when you don't know if there's going to be any people in the crowd. Will he have that to compare against Alabama's spring game, or would you rather have spring practice done? That way you can spend all of your time dealing with him as a recruit. And so it looks like if they had their druthers, yeah, come on in for a game, the spring game, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, and whenever they do play that spring game, if it is April 17th or some other time, the majority of the class of 2021 is already going to be there and on the field because they are already on campus and have started working out, with perhaps a few exceptions, as you mentioned there. It was interesting to me that Day talked about how close this class was. I mean, that's something you kind of hear every year, but he talked about the fact that, not just in spite of the fact that they couldn't get together like usual last fall, but actually because of the fact that they couldn't get together last fall, that was one of the reasons this class was seemingly so tight knit. So can you explain sort of the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it was an interesting story from Day. As he said, he was at the facility and there were some players, some of the freshmen, having a meal at a table and laughing and talking. And he sat down with them and they were looked like old friends. And yet they had just really, for the first time ever, like met each other in the same room. But they had grown close through Zoom and through texting and all of that. And yet this is like the first time they've ever been in the same room, basically, but they were very close. And he said it's been interesting to watch that dynamic because they have not been able to visit with each other. They have not been able to experience the same things. They've all been off on their own, experiencing the same thing that way. They've all had their unique experiences that they can then, they all relate to each other, and then they get here and they already have this bond that they've gone through. And so he said it's been interesting to watch, and you think that will continue to build. I wonder if they get along so well right now, it's because they just haven't gotten sick of each other yet. They haven't been around each other a lot, and so you don't find the annoyances yet. But it has been interesting. They've had their group texts forever, and they do all of the Zoom calls and all. I'm sure plenty of video games, which is just another way that these guys get to know each other before they actually step foot in the same room with each other. And so the class is kind of close before it ever gets to Ohio State now.
And, now they just got here. They just got to Ohio State. It is way too early to make any kind of real judgments on any of these guys. That, of course, never stops people from asking. So Ryan Day was asked about a couple, he doesn't want to leave anyone out. He doesn't want to, but he did name a couple guys who surprised him when they first arrived. So he named one on offense and one on defense. So who are the people who he is definitely guaranteeing are going to be future Heisman Trophy winners?
And I believe those were his exact words. First defensive Heisman winner since Charles Woodson. He mentioned, but he said Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle, he's a big guy. He's listed on the websites like 330 pounds. I don't know how accurate that is, but he did say he's a big guy who impressed him by how well he moves. The first guy he mentioned, however, was receiver Marvin Harrison, who said he looks like a different guy, and he's 6'3", 205, 210 pounds, something like that. But guys who, whenever these questions are asked, I don't even ask them anymore because Day will be like, well, I don't want to go, don't want to mention one guy because then I'll forget somebody. And he did that. And then he's like, but you know what? And then that's what you want. And it may mean absolutely nothing moving forward in terms of who plays as a freshman or a sophomore or even as a junior. But you do like to hear just they're just working out. That's all they're doing. And still people stand out, and just let us know that we're looking for morsels here. And so if he did say Marvin Harrison and Tyleik Williams, so those are two guys to keep in mind. And it is always interesting because Urban Meyer was the same way. You don't want to mention anybody for lack for and leaving somebody out where you're like, I should have mentioned him, and now feathers are ruffled. but it was, two names of note for Buckeye fans to keep in mind.
That is definitely, it's right along the lines of the black stripe removals, where it doesn't necessarily guarantee future stardom, but it's like, okay, this is interesting. When you hear a coach talk about a guy who's just arrived and they, talk about like, hey, this guy's a future captain. Like that's something that Day talked about with Court Williams last year. And then Court Williams is hurt, but it's like, okay, you still sort of have that on file that like, hey, a year or two from now, keep that in mind with Court Williams. File that away on Marvin Harrison and Tyleik Williams. Just keep that in mind for this fall, maybe next fall. I mean, Marvin Harrison, when he was visiting for Ohio State in the spring game 2 years ago, I think he was a real skinny little kid. So to be up to 210 pounds potentially now, like that's okay. Like that is some substantial growth. I can see how Ryan Day sees that representing some pretty substantial growth. So, Tony, thank you for joining us. It was always nice to talk to Ryan Day, get a little bit of an update on where things stand. And also make sure you visit BuckeyeScoop.com to get lots of updates on where things stand. There's a pretty big basketball game coming up later tonight. That's going to be something you're going to want to keep an eye on as the Buckeyes visit Iowa. Also, plenty of recruiting stuff to keep an eye on as well. As we mentioned, the nation's #1 player for 2021. Still looking very seriously at the Buckeyes. That would be a monster addition to that 2021 recruiting class, and 2022 and even 2023 cycles already starting to fire up as well. Buckeyes heading into winter workouts, and then we're only a little over a month away from the start of spring ball now. All of a sudden, so there is no off season. This is everything is just a different kind of season. So make sure you check that all out at BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Spreaker. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and review, which helps other folks find those shows as well. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.